The next day, Kang Ji is dressing up and getting ready for school as he worries over him getting called over to the teacher's room when he gets to school. Kang Ji makes up his mind and decides to move on and leave the things that had already happened in the past and follow his own path in the future from now. He heads down the stairs thinking that it was probably in his best interest to head to school and get a grasp on the situation first, as Detective Kim was definitely going to organize a disciplinary committee to punish those involved. He greets his first uncle on the way and notices the other uncles are nowhere to be seen and asks his uncle where they were. His uncle tells him that they were all busy doing morning exercises at the moment and sees him out to the house, wishing him a good day ahead at school. Kang Ji walks out and attempts to behave like what he believes a bad person would. He starts in a way which he believes is how real men walk, but is unaware that he had been walking in a really awkward and goofy manner. He tries to spit out some saliva, again imitating the way he believes a bad person behaves, but fails miserably as his mouth gets covered with his spit. His uncles can be seen stealthily monitoring him from behind with masks on as they go over the instructions they had received from the first uncle the day prior. He had told them to take down any guy that looked suspicious and prevent the young master to get attacked like he had been before by an unknown bastard. They had decided to split into two groups to constantly protect young master, and today happened to be Gye Sang and Taegon's duty to scout the routes ahead. The three noticed that Kang Ji had already left as one of them asks Gun Ho, who wasn't meant to be there, why he was present. He explains that Jae Wook had asked him to tag along with them and assist them with anything that needs help as they get ready to follow after Kang Ji without getting caught. The second uncle comments on Kang Ji's awkward walk but seems to think that he's somehow getting better. The other two follow up with a question, asking why Kang Ji was going to school alone when people usually go with their friends. After hearing this, the second uncle recalls the time Kang Ji had bought his friends over at the house and realizes that it was the first time he had ever done so. He looks concerned as he starts to believe that Kang Ji didn't have any friends at school. As Kang Ji is casually walking down the road, he notices a familiar-looking bag and, realizing it was Song Jung-sik, calls out to him to greet him from behind. Song Jung-sik turns around at the voice in confusion, wondering why Kang Ji was still regularly attending school despite him wanting to become someone bad. He notices the three uncles from behind and is about to question their presence when the uncle suddenly tells him to keep quiet about it, stopping Song Jung-sik from continuing his words, leaving the oblivious Kang Ji wondering if there was anything there about which he didn't know. Kang Ji and Song Jung-sik then start walking together to school, and Kang Ji brings up the judo training and that he also needed to go find Du Park as well. Song Jung-sik, remembering that there was indeed judo training that day, invites Kang Ji to go together with him later, and they continue on while making small talk. The second uncle looks relieved just by the fact that Kang Ji had managed to make a true friend, even if it was just one, as the other comments that having more was still better, even though he agreed with what the second uncle said. Just as they're having this conversation, Lee Yi-ji notices Kang Ji and Song Jung-suk and calls out to them. The three greet each other as Lee Yi-ji naturally proceeds to join their small group on their walk to the school. Kang Ji comments on Yi-ji's clothes, seeing that it was the first time he had seen her wear the school uniform properly. Yi-ji tries to flirt with Kang Ji as Song Jung-suk from the side wonders if she had finally decided to take her relationship with Kang Ji seriously and was just going to go for it now. The uncles observing them from behind are shocked to see that one of Kang Ji's real friends was a female friend. After that, Kang Ji also greets Jong Yoon and tells him to join their group. Jong Yoon greets him back but seems reluctant to join as he somehow feels that he might not be welcome to walk with their group. Kang Ji, after hearing this, laughs it off and tells him to not to worry as they were all friends. Jong Yoon seems to loosen up a bit as he starts making small chat with Kang Ji when he suddenly bumps into a passerby. Frustrated, the gangster-looking passerby turns around, cursing at the person he had bumped into. Yi-ji seems to recognize the person and, after thinking about it, remembers that she had seen him in her previous school and that he was also a part of the Super Assholes Alliance. She tries to remember his name as well but gets it wrong, making the person named Lee Won-ik even more irritated. Kang Ji repeats the name of the person, as if to confirm it was really him with clenched fists, and puts forth his hand in a greeting gesture, while also introducing himself as Kang Ji-ung as he asks Won-ik for a handshake. Won-ik is surprised to hear the name Kang Ji-ung at first, but then brings up the fact that he had actually been looking for him and had something he wanted to say to him. He tells him about Park Myung-jun from Sangneum High and tells him to follow him as that person had something to say to him. Kang-ji agrees but still asks if he was not going to shake hands with him. Lee Won-ik agrees and while formally introducing himself, shakes Kang-ji's hand. But as Won-ik grabs onto Kang-ji's hand, he sees Kang-ji smiling creepily while squeezing his hands and gets irritated by it. He questions Kang-ji what he was doing but gets ignored as Kang-ji puts more strength into his grip and squeezing his hand even harder, questioning Won-ik instead about why he was there when it was Park Myung-jun who had something to say to him. Won-ik's whole body shudders, his face scrunching up in pain and fear as he begs Kang-ji to let go of him. Seeing that Kang-ji was getting violent, Yi-ji looks around to make sure there were no police or teacher around to ensure no one interferes. At the same time, Kang-ji puts even more strength into his grip, crushing Won-ik's hand and tells him that if Park Myung-jun had something to say to him, he should come himself and to also pass along the message to the rest of the Super Assholes Alliance members that they would get beaten up by Kang-ji if they were seen loitering around in front of their school. Hardly getting himself together, Won-ik says, with tears in his eyes, that he should just go to him directly instead of telling him to go and telling him to come talk to Kang-ji directly. Hearing this, Kang-ji grabs even harder, causing Won-ik's fingers to bend in a weird way as he screams out in pain and tells him to bring him to where Sangneum High was. Won-ik curses at Kang-ji with tears and resentment in his eyes while holding onto his hand with his knees on the ground and questions if he really wanted him to guide him there. Kang-ji tells him that he wasn't kidding and tells him to take his hand as support and stand up. Seeing the hand in front of him, Won-ik gets even more scared as it seems that he had just been traumatized by Kang-ji's monstrous grip strength and agrees to bring him to Sangneum High as long as he didn't grab him anymore. After getting the confirmation from Won-ik, Kang-ji turns around and addresses his friends, telling them he would be gone for a while as they had heard. Yi-ji freaks out at the aspect of Kang-ji going to Sangneum High all by himself and snaps at him, telling him that if he was going to go then he should bring Song Jung-suk along with him as well. Jung-suk seems to agree with Yi-ji's thought process as well at first but is dumbfounded when she mentions for him to go along as well. Jong-yoon from the side interrupts them and tells them that they should give out Kang-ji's contact info to them instead of going there so abruptly. Hearing his suggestion, the three compliment him for being such a smart guy, making Jong-yoon feel complicated as he thought that it was just common sense. While behind them, Won-ik sees that the four were busy talking with each other and that it was the perfect time for him to run away. He gets up and takes off in the other direction when he gets noticed by Kang-ji, who also starts pursuing him in a hurry. Refusing to stop, Won-ik continues to run until he turns around a corner and stops in front of a group of three men. He seems to know them as two of the members of the group turn around and notices Won-ik. Won-ik cries out, telling them to contact Myung-jun quickly when Kang-ji finally catches up to him. Sang-hoo, the guy getting bullied by the group of two men, is the first one to notice Kang-ji as his face brightens up in joy, thinking that Kang-ji had come to save him. Kang-ji also notices Sang-hoo and asks him what had happened. After learning from Sang-hoo that these guys were beating him up and extorting money from him, Kang-ji starts shaking with rage and decides he would just beat all of them up right there instead of going to Sangneum High. He tells Sang-hoo to come over to his side as is about to beat the punks up. Sang-hoo is relieved that Kang-ji was with him and suddenly starts acting very cocky around the same guys who were beating him earlier. He pushes them with his elbows and walks behind Kang-ji to hide away with the walls as his cover. One of the guys is ticked off by this act and starts cracking up his knuckles, while looking down on Kang-ji as someone who only had connections and nothing else. He is sure that he will beat Kang-ji to the ground in just 3 seconds and rushes in to confront him. He punches straight ahead but Kang-ji ducks the punch and closes in on the other guy, squeezing his fist tight and throws a punch hitting the guy on his cheeks, knocking him out. Both Won-ik and the other member trembles in fear at the display of strength from Kang-ji as one questions how Kang-ji was this good when he was thought to be a big loser. Sang-hoo laughs at the sight of the person lying in front of him, knocked out when Yi-ji and the group comes running towards them and notices Sang-hoo standing there. After learning from Sang-hoo what was happening, Yi-ji is angered by the fact that Sang-hoo was just hiding away instead of helping Kang-ji take on the members of the Super Assholes Alliance. In the meantime, the guy who had been knocked down struggles to get up as he starts making excuses as to why he lost. He riles up the other members by telling them that they had the advantage in numbers and tells them to attack Kang-ji together. After hearing this, one shows concern for his hand as the other one gets ready to fight Kang-ji, sure of his victory against him if they fought him together. Seeing that all three were now coming at him together, Kang Ji tells them to hurry it up as he still had school to attend. Jung Suk, also noticing that it was a 3-against-1 fight, gives his bag to Jong Yoon to hold and decides to head in to join Kang Ji as well. As he gets closer, the other three are startled when they see him, and Jung Suk also seems to recognize the group in front of him. The guys are struck with fear due to the presence of Jung Suk and contemplates over whether they should just call Myung Jun instead than continuing this fight. But Kang Ji tells Jung Suk to not interfere in the fight and let him handle the guys by himself. Jung Suk agrees and swears that he would not interfere in the fight, giving the other party a boost in confidence as they no longer needed to fight Jung Suk, whom they thought of to be too overpowered. But they are still unsure if Jung Suk was just going to purely observe and not interfere if things start looking bad for Kang Ji, and also seeing that Won-ik wouldn't be able to join the fight because of his injured hand. They think that they have no choice but to call Myung Jun for help. Even Kang Ji tells them that they could call Myung Jun if they wanted to as well, but Yi Ji is concerned about Kang Ji and tells Jung Suk to stop observing and fight together or stop him. Jung Suk tells her that Kang Ji needs to be able to handle situations like these by himself, as there were going to be a lot more such incidents in the future, otherwise it would be harder for him to get stronger from that point on. Yi Ji, though, shows no interest in what Jung Suk believes and instead is more frustrated, which leads to her taking out her phone as she decides to call Lee Do Park to handle the matter. Just as she is about to dial the number, a person with long hair arrives on a red-colored bike with a red helmet covering his face and stops right in front of them. The new guest catches the attention of Yi Ji and group as they turn around with question marks floating above their head, but the guest outright ignores them and addresses the guys from Sangneum High, asking them how the situation had turned out like this when all he had told them to do was pass on a message. He calls out to Kang Ji-eung and Song Jung Suk, asking them to have a talk with him instead. The new persons, Myung Jun's arrival causes the previously fear-stricken guys to start cackling as they believe Kang Ji and Jung Suk to be no match for Myung Jun. Both Kang Ji and Jung Suk also turn around to take a look at Myung Jun as Jong Yoon and Sang, who also start sweating buckets in fear at the sight of Park Myung Jun. Myung Jun continues to walk ahead in a carefree manner and even jokes and teases Lee Yi Ji when he sees her. But seeing Yi Ji turn away from him, he moves on and starts heading towards Kang Ji when he is stopped by Jung Suk, who tells him to stay where he was and speak from there. He complies and stops in his tracks and tells them that he had not come to fight them and that they should let go of his friends first. But Kang Ji is unsure about letting Myung Jun's friends go, as they had bullied and extorted a kid from their school, which makes him think that it should be okay if he beat them up first and then let them go. A conflicted expression can be seen on the face of Myung Jun, as he really hadn't expected the situation to be like this. He still emphasizes that he had not come to fight and really just had something he wanted to talk about with Kang Ji. Hearing this, Kang Ji starts walking up towards him, saying that he would beat him first and then ask what he wanted to talk about, when he gets stopped by Jung Suk, who tells him that they should at least hear him out first. Seeing that Kang Ji and Jung Suk were ready to talk, Myung Jun asks the others present to leave so that they can have a chat among themselves. Yi Ji is annoyed by the carefree attitude of Myung Jun, but decides it would be better to leave now and takes both Jong Yoon and Sang Hu with her. The Super Assholes Alliance members also show concern for Myung Jun, as if they left, Myung Jun would be left to deal with two people by himself, but Myung Jun drives them away nonetheless, saying they were just hindrances for him, as anger surfaces on his face. The group then walks away, all the while cursing Kang Ji from behind for their misfortune. On the other side, Jong Yoon is also concerned about Kang Ji, but Yi Ji reassures him, saying that it would be fine because Jung Suk was there and she could always call Lee Do Park if needed. But Yi Ji is still a little bothered by what her brother had told him about how Myung Jun had taken over Sangneum High as its boss when he was just a first year. Meanwhile, Sang, who had been babbling on about Kang Ji from behind for a while now, which annoys Yi Ji, making her turn around to address him with curses and death threats. But disregarding those threats, Sang, who acts up even more, asking Yi Ji if she could even win against him in a fight with a smug face. Yi Ji's patience slowly starts shattering as she finds it hard to believe what Sang Hu was saying. Meanwhile, on Kang Ji's side, Jung Suk urges Myung Jun to tell them about what he wanted to talk about with them. Myung Jun shows relief over the fact that he let Jung Suk stay back because he thinks that it would have been hard to talk to Kang Ji if he wasn't around. He finally reveals to Kang Ji and Jung Suk that he wanted to form an alliance with them, which comes across as quite a shock to both Kang Ji and Jung Suk. Seeing that allying with them would mean that Myung-jun was betraying the Super Assholes alliance. Jung Suk wanted to know what he would gain from doing something like that. He knew that allying with someone like Sang Neom's Park Myung-jun was going to be of definite help to them when they would go after the rest of the schools, as it was definitely going to be hard for just him and Kang Ji to destroy the Super Assholes alone, which made it seem like quite a good proposal. Myung-jun also adds that he was not doing this without thinking it through and would let them know what his plans were after they became allies. Jung Suk seems to be in serious contemplation and ultimately decides that they still needed some time to think this through. Myung-jun is content with their current talk as he turns around and heads towards his bike while asking them to not make him wait too long and that he would look forward to hearing from them soon. Kang Ji, who had been silent all this while, suddenly calls out from behind and snaps at Jung Suk for deciding to do something like that all by himself and insists they go beat them all up right then. But Jung Suk stops Kang Ji in his tracks and calmly explains to him that he did it for the sake of being able to beat them all up more easily and asks him to view this in a more positive light. Myung-jun, who had already mounted his bike, also chimes in, telling Kang Ji to calm his tits and asking him if he really believed that he can easily destroy the Super Assholes just by getting excited all like that. But all this does is agitate Kang Ji further, and he decides that even if they ended up allying, he would still beat his ass. Myung-jun just goes along with it, treating it as a joke, and puts on his helmet, riding away on his bike. After he is gone, Kang Ji comments on how he didn't like that bastard and asks Jung Suk just why did he want to team up with someone like him. Jung Suk tells him they should walk to school first, and he would explain why he did that on the way. As they start walking, Kang Ji again asks, as if to confirm, that it was fine for him to beat Myung-jun up after everything was over, to which Jung Suk agrees with. And after that, Kang Ji arrived at their school while talking to Song Jung Suk. The atmosphere of the school was now vastly different from how it used to be. The corridor that was always noisy had become very silent, and there was a new piece of information placed where the kids were gathering at. The information was about Shin Jaeong-cheol and his clique. The incident was being handled much faster than before. Together with the news of Shin Jaeong-cheol and his clique getting punished, rumors regarding Kang Ji-young and Song Jung-suk were spreading like wildfire as well. As they arrive at the classroom, they notice Jong-yoon and Sang-hoo talking about how Kang Ji-young was the new boss of Jiran High with Song Jung-suk by his side. It is at this time that Kang Ji realizes that he had accidentally become the boss of Jiran High's second years. And the rumors of that spread even further and quicker through chat messages as we see different people from different regions reacting to the information posted on the chat room. The rumors had spread like a wildfire and had reached the ears of someone Kang Ji-young had hoped it would never reach. But the class atmosphere remained the same, even though Shin Jaeong-cheol's clique wasn't around anymore due to the fear of Kang Ji-young. Song Jung-suk tells Kang Ji-young about how it was to be expected, and whether he would become someone they would fear and detest would be entirely dependent on what he did. He also mentions that even though it was all new for Kang Ji-young, he was quite used to it and didn't let it bother him at all as he walks up to his seat and puts his head over his hands to catch some sleep. Kang Ji-young wonders if that was how it was going to be even though he hadn't bullied anyone, and when he thinks about what Song Jung-suk had told him, he realizes that that was indeed the case with Song Jung-suk's image till now. As he is caught up in his own thoughts, a hand grabs his sleeves, making him turn to notice Lee Yi-ji sitting with an empty seat beside her. She beckons Kang Ji-young to come sit beside her, but Kang Ji-young refuses, saying that wasn't his seat. Just then Jong-yoon pitches in, informing him that his seat had been changed and taking this chance. Lee Yi-ji also tells him that Lee Do-park had asked her to inform Kang Ji-young on everything about the Super Assholes Alliance. Thinking that he would learn more about them quicker if he sat there, Kang Ji-young takes the seat and sits on it. Yi-ji is overjoyed by the fact that Kang Ji-young decided to sit beside her and excitedly takes out a book she had took notes on and prepared as she decides to start with Sang Neom High, the school Park Myung-jun was from. Lee Yi-ji begins her explanation starting with Sang Neom High that Park Myung-jun was in. She first tells Kang Ji about the problematic Sang Neom middle school trio. She continues on describing them, calling them as someone with seriously loose screws. The first one she describes is Kim Jong-wai, who she considers to be the craziest among the three of them and that no one had any idea about his whereabouts. Moving on, she brings up another person who had also disappeared suddenly without any news named Kim Yong-jeon. She had seen him a few times because he was the junior of Lee Do-park in judo and describes him as someone with a build similar to Song Jung-suk. She also adds that he calls himself the Sang Neom scoundrel. In the end, she talks about Park Myong-jun, who her brother had told to be extra careful of as he was someone who had beat up a Year 3 student even before the first semester of his first year had ended. He also mainly used kicks in a fight because he was a black belt in Taekwondo and also a soccer maniac. Lee Yi-ji mentions that because of that, he would be a bad fit for Kang Ji-eung in a fight. Kang Ji shows concern over that fact that it was indeed true since he hadn't fought with anyone that mainly used kicks, but Lee Yi-ji cheers him up, telling him that she had prepared to help him master some counter techniques for kicks so as to help him. Meanwhile, the two friends of Kang Ji, sitting across the classroom, are filled with envy after seeing Kang Ji having become a totally different person in a few days, and Sang, who especially is enraged over the fact that Lee Yi-ji was trying to get closer to his friend Kang Ji and finds her behavior to be repulsive. After Yi-ji is done recounting the info she had collected, Kang Ji shows his gratitude, but Yi-ji takes this chance and suggests they go out together to get some food, which Kang Ji happily agrees with. Just then, the door to the classroom opens as Soo-jin walks in with a sullen expression on her face. Kang Ji is shocked to see Soo-jin attending school and calls out to her, catching her attention. At the call, Soo-jin turns around and notices Lee Yi-ji sitting next to Kang Ji. Lee Yi-ji snickers with a smug expression on her face, as if to say that she had one, which makes Soo-jin jealous as she turns back her head from them in anger, trying to ignore them. She whispers something in the ears of a girl sitting in front and just walks out of the class after getting permission from the teacher who had just arrived. Seeing Soo-jin leave, Kang Ji abruptly stands up from his seat, intending to go after Soo-jin. Lee Yi-ji tries to stop him from going, but it doesn't work as Kang Ji dashes out of the classroom without the teacher's permission to chase after Soo-jin. He catches up to Soo-jin and stops her, asking her to talk to him if she was having any troubles. Listening to Kang Ji-eung still showing concern for her, Soo-jin just feels miserable as she tells Kang Ji that she was back in school to attend the school violence disciplinary meeting and not to talk with him. Despite this, Kang Ji still asks her to contact him later as he was genuinely worried about her, but Soo-jin seems to try and ignore his words as she turns away from him while biting her lips and tears filling her eyes. She walks away and continues to ignore Kang Ji, who is still trying to call out to her from behind. After some time, he heads back to the classroom and takes his seat. Kang Ji is so caught up in his thoughts that it takes him a while to register Lee Yi-ji trying to talk with him in concern. Kang Ji tries to act cheerful in front of Yi-ji when he notices her, hiding his dilemma so as to not worry her. Though this act of Kang Ji gets easily see-through by Yi-ji, but she refrains from mentioning it to him. Meanwhile, Kang Ji is clearly downcast and unsure about his own future as he had only became bad because of Soo-jin, but what he was going to do from then on would be no longer because of her.